The guy that was driving, smashed all his face in. The other guy on the right side, he flew out the back. I don't know how, he just flew out the back window, sliced all his legs up. And my friend who was killed, he walked up to me and I said, "Boot, you didn't say goodbye." Starting in my early years really, I was brought up on a council estate with my mum and my sister. My sister was about 10 years older than me. I didn't have a dad around me. I used to see him now and then, but basically my dad wasn't around as a young age. And I remember the impact that used to have on me. I remember particularly one time, I remember just crying in my bedroom, realising that I didn't have a dad. And other kids did, and I just sort of felt quite alone really. But yeah, so I grew up with my mum and my sister, and when we was kids, there was a lot of particularly where I lived, there's a lot of people getting into glue-sniffing and sniffing gas and solvents and stuff like that. And I, at a very young age, I think about the age of 8, I started getting into that sort of stuff. From 8 to 10, yeah, just got bullied a little bit. So I was quite short as a kid. So the sort of beginning of life for me wasn't the best really. Anyway, we were living one particular area in a council estate. We moved to another area, and that's when I started sort of hanging around with the wrong type of people really. I started getting into a lot of trouble with the police, started getting arrested, started stealing a lot, breaking into houses and shops and burglary and all that sort of stuff. There was a lot of dark stuff going on when I was a kid. I remember walking through the woods when I was young, and there was a couple of these birds that had been sacrificed in a cage. It sounds a bit horrific, but there was sort of like witchcraft going on around the area when I was very young, which sort of freaked me out a little bit. But I knew there was a couple of friends of mine that they were into that stuff. I didn't particularly want to get into anything like that, but it's just trying to paint a picture really of the beginning of my life. There was a lot of sort of stuff that it wasn't helping me really. I didn't do very well at school at all. I couldn't stand school. I was glad to get out of there. I was constantly, particularly at a young age, I was always outside the headmaster's office, or being told to stand in the corner or do detention and stuff like that. And I just really, really struggled at school. And I think at the back of my mind was the whole thing of like, I didn't have a dad there. I didn't have a parent there. Someone that could sort of show me the way, someone that could guide me, someone that could be a helpful boundary for me really in my life. So it was the only way I can think about it is like clawing at fresh air. You're looking for someone there to sort of be there for you and to support you and to give you guidance. And my dad wasn't there. My mum can only do so much. She worked 3 cleaning jobs. She was flat out. My sister was 10 years older than me, so we didn't really have a very good relationship. There was a bit of resentment there, so I come along a bit later and stuff like that. So it was all quite difficult, really. And so that was the start for me, really, growing up. I just remember sort of this loneliness, really. Though I did have grandparents, they were very good. My granddad, he was like a dad to me, really. So I had that going on. But yeah, so when I started hanging around with a lot of kids, I got, like I say, a lot of glue sniffing and stuff. There was a couple of times where, there was one time where I think I was about 9, and I was sniffing this glue, and I fell asleep with a glue bag on my face. I remember this man was walking his dog in the morning. He found me. He was really upset. He was crying because he sort of found this young little boy with a glue bag stuck to his head. I was lucky he found me. The ambulance came, and thankfully I was all right. So I had all that sort of going on. And then we moved to another part of the council estate where we were living, and then things just seemed to get a little bit more I don't know. I started getting drinking quite a lot, an awful lot of alcohol. Things just got a bit worse, really. And like I mentioned, I got into a lot more crime, hanging around the wrong sort of people. And then I just started, there was a gang of us. This is when I was 14, 15. And we just started going around burgling regularly, going out, burgling into places, into shops, people's houses. I got to a point where I would just go out on my own, knock on the door. If no one answered, I just boot the front door in, run in, rob what was ever in there, and run off. I got to that point where I was out of control, really. And I knew that. I knew there was something missing in my life. I knew there was something. I just felt I didn't have any boundaries, and I was capable of, can do all sorts of things, and there was like no one could stop me. And it was like there was just something. I don't know. There was just something missing, really. Anyway, so that is how things sort of stuff. And then back in the 80s and stuff like that, early 90s, there was a lot of we did a lot of joyriding when we were kids. So I got into nicking cars, spinning around the area, waiting for police to chase and stuff like that. So there was an awful lot of that was going on. A lot of my friends were into it. Well, all my friends were. There was all into something. So there wasn't really much. There wasn't much to do as a kid. It was a youth club that we had. Apart from that, there was a void in the area. Which drugs, particularly when heroin and speed and stuff started to become quite popular, it just sort of wiped the area out. Really, it's just everyone was on something. So I got into a lot of that sort of stuff. So what happened was one night we stole a car. There was 5 of us, and we were driving. I was sat in the front. Our friend who was driving. There was 3 people in the back, and we had a friend. The guy in the back, his name was Boot. That was his nickname. And it was just really weird how it all worked. We stole this car, but then we realised we didn't have much petrol in the car, so we needed to get the petrol cap off the car. So my friend Boot was sat. He said, "Oh, don't worry, I'll do it." He jumped out, and then the other guy on the other side jumped out, and they tried to do it, break. Anyway, they managed to get it off, and then they both jumped back in the car, but they swapped seats, and anyway, we're doing about 70 miles an hour down this road. It was 5 o'clock in the morning. It was summer. It was light. And the driver said, "Shall I jump the red lights? Shall I jump the red lights?" And we went, yeah, go on. And I remember looking back at Boot and we smiled. And as we went through the red lights, there was a police car just naturally coming back from its shift. And it came, so we were driving like that, and the car come and just collision smashed straight to the side of us. So we slowly went straight through a brick wall, knocked a lamppost down. The guy that was driving, smashed all his face in. Me, I broke my. It's mad. Whenever I went out nicking cars, even though it was dangerous, I still insisted on putting a seatbelt on for some reason, because I thought, it'd keep me safe. And it did. I had the seatbelt on, and I broke my shoulder on the seatbelt, so that showed the sort of the impact of we had in the car. And then there was one guy in the middle. I was only just turned 16 by then, so we were all like 16, 15. The guy was a bit older. The guy, my friend in the middle, he broke his pelvis between the 2 chairs, completely, mashed his pelvis up. The other guy on the right side, he flew out the back. I don't know how, he just flew out the back window, sliced all his legs up. And then my friend Boot on the back, on the left hand side, he had whiplash and he was killed instantly. It's funny because the experience is very strange. I remember sort of coming to, and my arm flopped down. I thought, and I heard water. I don't know what that was. And my first instinct was, I need to get out of here. So I got out of the car. The driver ran off, and I managed to get out of the car. I didn't know what was going on, and I just ran. It's about 5:30 in the morning. I was, running up the lane. I was in a bit of a mess. And this guy that was going to work saw me. Obviously, I'm only very young. I was obviously looking very distressed and hurt. And he picked me up and he took me to the hospital. Of course, the police came because they were looking for me, and I was arrested in the hospital. But I didn't really know what happened. I didn't know what who was hurt in the car. Didn't know anything about it. I can't really remember when I found out. I think it was probably when they came into the cell. So that was quite horrific for me, really. And what was really strange was, as I was in the cell, I fell asleep, and I don't know if you've ever had one of these dreams when they're realer than real, and it's like it's real, you're there. And I had this dream, and my friend who was killed, he walked up to me, and I said, "Boot, you didn't say goodbye." And he just gave me this big smile, and then he walked off, and then I woke up. And at that point, I thought, there's something a little bit more to life. There's a spiritual side to life, which I was completely oblivious to. Anyway, so, I got bandaged up and I had my arm in a sling, was put on bail, police bail. The driver, he ran. He did a runner because he was worried, because the guy that got killed, his family was, wanted to hunt him down because he was driving the car. So it was all a bit nasty. So that's what happened there. And then, I don't know, it shifted something inside of me. I couldn't quite work out what. I remember the funeral as well. I remember we did the funeral, and the whole place was just full up. The whole community turned up. It's just loads of people there. And I remember when we took the coffin in, because I never really experienced death in that sense. My granddad was alive, my nan was alive. I think my dog died once, which obviously was upsetting, but not the same as someone dying. So it really, really impacted me. I remember they carried the coffin through the brothers. I remember that he had quite a few brothers, step-brothers. They carried the coffin into the church, and they played Brothers in Arms by Dire Straits, and I remember just breaking down, and we were all crying, and it had a massive impact. And then from then, I ended up getting in with a few other guys, and we were a little gang, really, and we used to go down south and burgle warehouses. We used to break in, take the safes, break the safes open. So I did quite a lot of that, really. I don't know why, it was just off the back of that. It was like I was led from one thing to another. And, I got arrested a couple of times down there. And then I started, because quite a lot of my friends started getting into amphetamines, and I started getting into that. There's a lot of dope smoking as well. I got into a bit of dope smoking, but particularly speed. We started doing that, and it started off swallowing it, then it was like snorting it, and then eventually, before we knew it, we were all injecting amphetamines. And then just life for me, it just started going downhill. Then it was like, what it used to be, to be honest, it was quite fun getting drunk and getting stoned and having a bit of speed, so I wouldn't have done it otherwise. But after a while, the fun stopped, and life just got, life got very paranoid. You're always looking over your shoulder. I was wanted by at that point. I had done so many burglaries. I left bail. I was wanted by the police. I was on the run, basically. So I lived down in Exmouth in tents and stuff. I just lived off burgling places, but I was wanted by the police. I knew if I got caught, I was going to go to jail. So I lived a lot of that, really, and yeah, it just, I don't know, it just really, really got me in a bad place. Anyway, eventually things started to happen, and I was down in Devon, and eventually I got caught by the police. We were burgling one night. We burgled a big, I think it was a nightclub. And what we did, we'd go in there and sort of shut all the alarms off, and then we'd wait and we'd cut the telephone wires. I shouldn't tell you too much. Cut the telephone wires. We'd come back a little later, and then we'd just break in and, take everything. So that's what we did. And this particular night, we were all particularly tired, so we went and led in the sand dunes and had a sleep while we were waiting for the things to cool off a bit. And unknown to us, there was another gang of burglars robbing another place just up the road, and they decided they were going to go and hide on the beach as well. So anyway, the place that they were burgling, they came out to find them, but they didn't just find them; they found us. We weren't even related to it anyway. It was a bit of fate, you could say. So we all got arrested, and long story short, I was put on remand in ex-prison for a while. And then I ended up getting, I think it was 9 months or something like that. I ended up going to Portland, which used to be a ball store. So that was, but while I was there, which is really interesting, while I was there, if I can remember rightly, there was this guy that came in. They used to do chapel in the prison, and there was a guy that came in, and he come in with his whole family. And he'd share about Jesus and share about what God had done for him. But one of the things that struck me is he said he used to be a drunk, an alcoholic, and he used to hit his wife around and children, which is quite a powerful thing because they were there with him. But then he said he found God, and his life was completely changed. And I remember sitting there, and I was baffled. I thought, well, how did he stop what he liked doing? I couldn't understand how he could just stop, just like that. It puzzled me. And while I was in there, a friend, my brother's friend, had become a Christian, and he sent me a John's Gospel. Now, I had no idea. I thought the Bible was an hymn book. I just didn't know what the Bible was at all. I wasn't interested in it. I used to regularly burgle the church cash box, where I lived. I just couldn't relate to church at all. It was more of ignorance, really. I didn't really know what it was about, and I wasn't really interested. So he sent me this John's Gospel, and I remember writing to my friend in another prison. There was another guy who got arrested on all the burglaries and that we were doing. And I said, I got this book, and I read it about a man called Jesus, and he healed people. And I was fascinated by it. It was just, I thought, I've never had anything in my life. And I started reading it. Anyway, I got out of prison. But I got out of prison, I moved back to Bristol, where I was from. And that didn't leave my head, really. I still had that in my mind about this thing that I'd read. Anyway, I went back to Bristol. I continued burgling houses. I continued injecting speed and stuff like that, and anything else I could inject. And I just remember I got to a point one day, and I just looked down. I remember looking down at my arms, and they were just covered in bruises, and my veins were all sunken. So it's very hard to get a needle in, then you got to start sticking a needle in your groin and that sort of stuff. Thankfully, I didn't get to that point, but my arms were just messed up. And I remember looking down thinking, Jase, what have you done? What have you done to yourself, man? What are you doing? I remember walking past a friend of mine, actually, and he looked at me. So as a kid, I was really, despite as a young kid, there was things that weren't perfect for me. I was actually quite happy. I quite liked having a laugh. I used to make people laugh and stuff like that. I was quite a happy kid. And I remember he walked past me, this friend of mine, and he went, "Cheer up, Jase." And at that point, I thought, do you know what? I'm not happy. I'm just not happy. So I continued doing that for a while, and in late 80s, early 90s, there used to be a lot of, illegal raves and stuff. You get someone and just turn up with a generator somewhere in a field. So you go down the pub and say, "Oh yeah, there's going to be a rave tomorrow. Where is it?" "Well, we don't know yet." "Oh yeah, it's going to be 12 o'clock in this field." And you just turn up at this random field. All these people would turn up, not knowing what was going on. And suddenly a generator would appear through the woods. It would start up, and then everyone would start raving to 4 or 5 in the morning. It's just a bit surreal, really. So I got into a lot of that, and when I was walking back from a rave, it was about 5:30 in the morning, 5:30, 6. And as we was walking back, I had all these thoughts because I was doing speed, smoking dope, drinking, and reading the Bible, at the same time. Revelation out of all things, which is quite a confusing thing to read. So I had all these weird things going on in my head, but I did have the sense that there was something more to life. And in my head, I was thinking to myself, who do I fear? Do I fear God, or do I fear the devil? And I was thinking this through, and suddenly my a friend who was walking beside me, he just turned to me and he said, the only fears are in your head. And at that point I thought, whoa, that's pretty dark. There's something very dark spiritual going on around me here. That guy's just read my mind. And I found out that some people were into telepathy. So he started to read my mind, and I just thought, I want to get out of here, really. I just thought I need to find more about this God, this person called Jesus, because, I was pretty worried. So I carried on hanging around for a while, reading my Bible, and I remember going to a friend's house, and he's a friend. His brother had become a Christian, and we used to sit in a room, sit in the bedroom that they shared. He was he used to go off bakering in the night, and that we'd use the room when we smoked dope and that. He knew that we used to sit in the room and use it, so he'd become a Christian. He stuck all these like Bible verses all over the wall, and we'd be like smoking dope and like reading these Bible verses as well. It's like for God so loved the world. What's he on about? So we just started. Anyway, it just got more and more. It just got more and more obvious to me that something was going on in my life. There was a side to life that was spiritual that I couldn't see, I couldn't touch, but it was there. And there was a good side, and also there was a very dark, destructive side. And I realized that I was on the destructive side. There was something after me that wanted to wreck my life. So there was one evening we were sat down, and we were having a smoke. I wasn't really stoned, it was just more out of habit, really. And we sat there, and suddenly I had this vision of God and the devil. It was really strange. And they were at war. And I suddenly realized that the war was my life. There was a war for my life going on. And I thought, well, I know whose side I want to be on. I want to be on the good guy's side, the one that wants to do me good. Even I still don't understand half of it. So I remember I said to my mates, I said, I've just got to go, I've got to go. And I went home. I made a roll up. I lit on my bed with the lights out, and I just felt this love. It was amazing. It was like a river going over me and over me and over me and over me. And I remember I just said, God, you're real. and that was it. It was just, God is real. And I know they talk about being born again. I mean, it really is. It's a thing. It was like suddenly my eyes, like my inner eyes, if you like, inside, I was just awoken, and I realized that God was real. It was literally real. Even now I can't believe it. So that just completely, and then after that I just thought, right, I want more of this. So I contacted my brother's friend, who was a Christian, and I went to the church, and he said he'd pray for me. So I went up to church, and he prayed. I asked Jesus into my life. I asked him to forgive me the stuff I'd done, because I had quite a lot that needed forgiving for. And that was the start of my life just turning completely around. It was still difficult. I still struggled. I still had some struggles. The drugs were still a little bit of pull on me. And I remember, I think we were out speeding one night, and so I had all this stuff going on. You got to realise I had all this good spiritual stuff moving in my life. You know, signs and all that was all a bit surreal, and then all this other dark stuff that it was like, oh. And we were out one night and we got arrested, and I was in the cell and I said, "Oi, boss, can I have a glass of water and a New Testament?" And I started reading it in my cell, and I remember when I got released, we wouldn't just wander around. They just nicked us just to keep us off the streets. I mean, and I remember when I got back home, I had I think I had £5 worth of dope and some fags, and I think I had a bottle of cider. And I said to myself, once I've smoked that and I've drank that, I'm not doing it again. And obviously God helped me, and I did. And I just stopped doing drugs, drinking, stuff like that, smoking. It just left me, really. And then I started going to church. And I started going to church, and it was weird. It was so weird, because I'd come. It was just very odd. I thought the people were very odd, but they were very nice. They were loving, and they were kind, and they were genuinely pleased to see me. Oh dear. Yeah, they were genuinely pleased to see me, which is quite nice. So I always remember that they used to do these sort of like buffets. You go to, and you know, you do a spread, and you go there. They always have quiche for some reason. I don't know why. It was all a bit strange, but it was a strange environment. But it was a healing environment. And the more I started just going to the place where it was positive and reading the Bible, I got really obsessed really wanted to read the Old Testament and New Testament. It was just fascinating, and it just strengthened me so much that I was on the right path. And then obviously my relationship with God developed. My knowledge of the God's word and stuff started to grow, and my life just completely changed. My sister thought I was joking. She thought I was making it up. Because I literally, I'd go around, rob a shop, and I'd go there, and she'd sell it all for me. Like, she was like, and she thought I was going to say, "Oh no, I'm only joking," but I wasn't. And my friends suddenly all fell away because there was nothing. You know, there was one time we lived in a little bungalow, and one time when I decided I was going to give up, my mate suddenly out of the blue knocked on the window and said, "Yeah, here's a bag of speed for free," which is, you know, pretty unusual. And I just thought, that's the devil at the window. You know, I'm not taking that. You can have that, mate. I'm going to keep to what I've decided to do. So eventually my friends sort of drifted off because they were still in that world, you know, crime and drugs. And I was being pulled out of it. I was making decisions to come out of it. So I went to a particular church for a couple of years, which was life-changing. I learned self-respect more than anything. I felt loved. I felt cared for. I started to grow in. I started playing the guitar. Started leading a bit of worship, and I started to share my testimony once or twice, not too much, but so I got a real desire to just to tell other people about what had happened. You know, how God is real, and He completely just changed your life. And but I was at this church, and they were a lovely church. But the thing was, I'd pick up the Bible and I'd read different passages in the Bible, and I didn't see many people living it. So I found this community, a Christian community that I went to live in, where they were actually living it day by day, 24/7. You know, church was your life, really. And I just saw loads of things happen there. People transformed, people from all sorts of backgrounds, drugs, drink, crime, like horrendous thing, the occult, many people from the occult there. Just completely transformed, because people just getting hold of God and getting hold of His Word, and just realize it. What people don't realize, they think the Bible is just like this big set of instructions that a load of nice people like do, and all the goody two shoes. But it's not. It's what they call sometimes a manual for life. The Bible transforms us from the darkness into the light. God pulls us from the darkness into the light. And I spent nearly 10 years in that community, and it was life-changing. I didn't have a dad, and then suddenly there were people around that become a dad to me. There were people that become like mothers to you. There was and brothers and sisters and people that really cared, and that's so healing to have that positive environment around. It's life-changing. It really, really is. So that was that. And then my dad he wasn't very well. He had cancer, and I had a few personal issues that I was struggling with. So I moved back to Bristol. I was living up north then. So I moved back to Bristol, and obviously my dad passed away. And then I joined another church, and I just started to grow and grow. While I was in the community, I learned to, preach. I learned to lead things. I learned to manage things. So I learned so much. And then when I came out of, I moved back to Bristol. I met my wife, and we got 2 step children now. We got one child was a stillborn, which sadly we lost. But she encouraged me, my wife encouraged me to go to college, and I thought, man, I ain't going to college. What am I going to learn there? But I went, and actually, it wasn't what I thought it would be. It was brilliant, and I had a real desire to learn. I went off and doing a foundation degree. I've got no maths and English. Even now, I've got no maths and English. I left school when I was 15. I'd been in my whole life was special schools. Not because I didn't have the ability to learn stuff, because I was just completely wild. So I basically left school by the time I was 15. And then obviously I had the accident, which transformed me. So I did a foundation degree, and then I went on to do a bachelor's, which I've done, and then I've just literally finished doing a master's. And that's all, and that's just opened loads of doors for me. When I lived in the community, I've been to Norway, Sweden, I can't forget the other place, Singapore, loads of different places where God has just changed the direction of my life, which I would never, ever even have thought in a million years I'd go to anywhere like that. Because I know what a score is when you're locked in that world, when you're locked in whatever you're doing, the drugs, the crime, that sort of scene, you can't see out of it. You're just locked in it. And you'll keep being locked in it until someone comes and opens the door and shows you a different way. And for me, that was Jesus. He knocked, I opened the door. You've got to open the door. As they say, the handle's on your side. You open the door, and then God's light will come in and change you. And that's exactly what it did to me. So I just finished the master's. I do a lot of preaching, a lot of studying. I currently run a house with homeless guys in at the moment. People that have been off the streets or drugs or in prison. So we do that. Help with youth work and stuff. So I'm actually I've become quite a positive person, really. Made some difference. God has completely changed my life. He has completely turned me around from where I was to now. People say, "Oh, I can't believe you did stuff like that," and that was me. That's my testimony that God has drawn me from darkness into light. So, yeah, that's me.
What would you say to someone who is struggling with drug addiction or a crime lifestyle and is looking for a way out?
What I'd say answer to that knock in your life. If you feel that Well, you'll know. You know yourself. You don't need to tell you. You'll know if you're listening to this and you're in that place. You know the reason why you're here is probably because already there's something searching you. You know that place ain't doing you any good, and it's going to rob you of your real potential as a human being, as a person. And I would say, open the door and let God in. Visit a church. Just start by saying, God, if you're real, just please come into my life. Just let me know. Just simple things like that. It don't have to be any fancy prayers. You don't have to wear fancy clothes to go to church and stuff. A lot of churches have changed. Find a good church, a place that's friendly, that are welcoming. But yeah, I would say if you're in that place and you're listening to this, there is definitely hope, right? So if you got in your head, there's no hope, I can't get out of this. Where's that coming from? That isn't God. That's the other side, who wants to keep you locked in. So I'd strongly encourage you to, maybe what I've shared now is maybe knocked on your heart a little bit. Just open up your life to Jesus, to God. Ask him to come in. Ask him to forgive you. And ask him to show you a different way, because God is more committed to you than you may think. I would say open that door in your life and allow God's love and light to come in, because he's got so much more for you, more than you can imagine. And there's thousands of testimonies. My testimony is just a minute part of some of the testimonies I've heard in my life are horrendous. There's some people that do some terrible things. It don't matter what you've done. It don't matter where you've been. No matter how bad it is, God will forgive, and God wants to show you another way. And you're no different than anyone else. You're no different than anyone else. The same grace and love that all Christians have found in Jesus is the same grace and love that you can find too. So I would say, open that door. Don't keep it, just let someone in, let something in that brings that light of Jesus, of the Christian God.